Let's go to sexual follies. So, the New York Times Magazine wrote a heartbreaking piece, which was heartbreaking not only in what it said, but in the moral stupidity of the newspaper reporting it. The world, when you enter the New York Times, you enter the world of the New York East Coast elite liberal. And sometimes it's a very sad place to be. And this thing was called What Teenagers Are Learning from Online Porn by Maggie Smith. Now, one thing that happens is adults sometimes look at young people and they think, oh, in this day and age, there's so much talk about sex, there's so much porn available, there's, people say anything, there's classes that kids must know a lot about sex that we didn't know. That may be true, but they still don't. They still don't really know, of course not, until you get into the world of dating and loving and interaction with real live human beings. You don't know anything. You don't know anything about sex. And so people are learning from things like porn. You all remember what it's like. You go get any information anywhere you can. And so in this piece, which is well researched, they interview these people, and one kid says it gets in your head. You don't know whether girls want sex or if they want you to do the things that they do in porn. You don't know whether the girls are going to be disappointed by the fact that you don't look like the guys in porn. I mean, I do, but I mean, other people may not. And the women obviously in porn are sometimes mistreated. It's sometimes rough, and yet the woman loves just being roughed up and hurt and all this stuff. And they don't know whether this is true. So the answer in this article, or at least one answer that's proposed, is a class on what is called porn literacy. What could possibly go wrong, right? So this is reading from the article. The course with the official title, The Truth About Pornography, a Pornography Literacy Curriculum for High School Students Designed to Reduce Sexual and Dating Violence, is a recent addition to Start Strong, a peer leadership program for teenagers headquartered in Boston's South End and funded by the city's public health agency. About 24 selected high school students attend every year, most of them Black or Latino, along with a few Asian students from Boston public high schools, including the city, so on and on. During most of the year, the teenagers learn about healthy relationships, dating violence, and LGBT issues, as opposed to English and history and math, but often through group discussions, role-playing, and other exercise. So what they're teaching them is that porn isn't necessarily reality. That's a very sad answer. It's a very sad answer. And yet, what are the other answers? Ross Douthat, in reaction to this piece, Ross Douthat is the Catholic op-ed writer who used to be a lot better before Trump, but now I think the New York Times just does not let people write what they actually think. Anyway, he wrote a piece called Let's Ban Porn. And he says the belief that it should not be restricted is a mistake. The belief that it cannot be censored is a superstition. Law and jurisprudence changed once to allow porn and can change again. And while you can find anything somewhere on the internet, making hardcore porn something to be quested after in dark corners would dramatically reduce its pedagogical role, its cultural normalcy, its power over libidos everywhere. And Peter Suderman at Reason, of course, Reason is a libertarian site. They don't want to ban anything. He answers Douthat by saying, to start with, you would need to stop the production of porn by business enterprises, forcing at minimum every person who has ever attended the Adult Video News Awards in a professional capacity to immediately find a new line of work. You would need to find a way to stop a slew of high-profile, incredibly lucrative websites from posting, hosting, or otherwise distributing explicit materials. After you crack down on the pros, you would need to go after amateurs by finding some way to stop tens of millions of iPhone-wielding Americans from making home movies, many of which would resemble professional products in quality. What's interesting about this, and by nature, I'm a libertarian, but I really see this as a plague. And the plague is not porn. The plague is an attitude to the human body and to human relationships that was sold to us by the left all from the 60s to today. And now that they're reaping the whirlwind, they don't like it very much. It's interesting when you look at the great ages of civilizations. If you think about the Augustan age of the ancient Rome, if you think about the Victorian age, if you think about the American 1950s, they're all marked by at least an outward display of prudery. And it's always prudery that comes after a libertine age. So in America, we had the 1920s and the 1930s, and anything goes. In olden days, a glimpse of stocking was looked on as something shocking, but now anything goes. But by the 1950s, not so much. And that was the golden age of this generation, of this cycle of Americanism. Victorian age, same thing. In the 1700s, lots of sex, lots of books about sex. Tom Jones and things like that. By the 1800s, by the Victorian age, everybody is, as you know, very prudish. But that's also that's probably one of the greatest ages of human civilizations. But one of the things is that with that comes a new respect for women in the household. And the Victorians would call her what do they call the angel in the house, the angel in the house. And of course, in the 1950s, the housewife was one of the key elements of all entertainment, all ideas. So what's interesting is that feminism has always had this reactionary shadow. Okay, first they say, yes, men and women should have the same kind of sex. And then, oh my God, women are being abused. This is no good. This is no good. They've always had this idea that men's desires should be prohibited, that porn was bad. They've always had a strain of feminism that porn was bad. And it would be interesting if feminism morphed in the same way that the left has morphed, the side of free speech has now morphed into the side of no speech. It would be interesting, and I do think this could happen, that feminism morphs into actual feminism, the defense of women in their roles as guiding families, guiding men, civilizing men. Now, when you say that without women, men would be uncivilized, feminists start screaming at you and say, it's not our role to civilize men. It's not our role to civilize men. And yet, they don't like living in a world without civilized men in it. And women are the only things that civilize men. All this Me Too movement is living in a world where women have lost their power to civilize men, have lost their mission to civilize men, have lost their mission to form men in families and in marriage. And they don't like so much what happens when that looks like. When they don't like so much what that looks like when that actually happens. So I have many times predicted a new Victorian age is coming. I do believe that is true. And it will be interesting to see if feminism morphs into the leader of some of that Victorian prudery and some of that Victorian elevation of the family. All right, the mailbag is tomorrow. Go to thedailywire.com, hit podcast, hit the Andrew Klavan podcast, hit the mailbag, ask any question you want. Your life will be changed. And sometimes for the better, the other times we just don't talk about. I'm Andrew Klavan. This is the Andrew Klavan Show. I'll see you then. Oh, hooray, hurrah. The Andrew Klavan Show is produced by Robert Sterling. Executive producer, Jeremy Boring. Senior producer, Jonathan Hay. Our supervising producer is Mathis Glover. Technical producer, Austin Stevens. Edited by Alex Zingaro. Audio is mixed by Mike Cormina. Hair and makeup is by Jesua Alvera. And our animations are by Cynthia Angulo and Jacob Jackson. The Andrew Klavan Show is a Daily Wire Forward Publishing production. Copyright Forward Publishing 2018.